Hi, everyone. Welcome to the virtual event space of Miami Book Fair and Books and Books. Today, we're thrilled to present two wonderful best-selling authors, Krystal Sutherland and Karen McManus. Krystal's latest book, House of Hollow, is a brilliant, fresh take on the fairy tales of old that manages to be a thrilling mystery, a horror novel, and something totally unique and visually stunning. It's like nothing you've read before. And so we're very excited to be a part of this release week and have her joined by such an amazing conversant in Karen. I'm going to read their formal bios. I'll tell you a little bit about your screen, and then we'll get started. So Krystal Sutherland's first novel, Bookseller Association's Indie... I'm missing words. Sorry. Krystal Sutherland's first novel made the Bookseller Association's Indie Next List in 2016. The film adaptation, Chemical Hearts, was produced by Amazon Studios and stars Lily Reinhardt and Austin Abrams. Sutherland served as an executive producer on the project. Her second novel, A Semi-Definitive List of Worst Nightmares, was published in 2017 and has been optioned for adaptation by Yellowbird. Originally from Australia, she has lived on 4 continents and currently calls London home. Karen McManus is the #1 New York Times, US Today, and international best-selling author of One of Us is Lying, Two Can Keep a Secret, One of Us is Next, and The Cousins. Her work has been translated into more than 40 languages worldwide. Karen lives in Massachusetts and holds a master's degree in journalism from Northeastern University, which she mostly uses to draft fake news stories for her novels. So a couple of things about your screen as you see it now. At the bottom right, there is a button that says Ask a Question. Looks like some of you have already used it. This is the best place for your questions. They will get lost in the chat, so drop them here. And when Karen and Krystal are done talking, they'll pick some questions to answer. And then, of course, there is no green button. We are going to drop links in the chat for the for House of Hollow and also Karen's books. These will take you to our online shop where you can find all of Karen and Krystal's backlist as well. And we ship worldwide. We can offer pickup locally. And of course, all these copies, the copies of House of Hollow will qualify you for one of the beautiful book plates that Krystal has offered. If you check out her social channels or ours, we have links where you can put your, send her your receipt and you get a special limited edition book plate with it's a little bit of an exclusive quote and drawing just for shopping from us or one of the indies on her tour. So with that, I'm done. I'll hand this over to Krystal and Karen, and I will see you guys in a little bit.
Hello.
Hello.
There we are. Hi.
Minor technical difficulty. Hello.
Hi. Happy release day.
It's here. It's finally here. I can't quite believe it, but
it is stunning. I've got mine behind me. It is such a beautiful cover. We were just talking about what a joy your Instagram feed has been over the past few weeks leading up to this
day, and only a doorway remained. And you could just see them scattered through the forest, like off in the distance. And to me, they kind of felt like fairy circles, like when you stumble across a ring of mushrooms in the woods. Like I felt kind of scared to walk near them or walk through them.
Walk through it, right? What would happen?
We were really like threatening. And I was like, what would happen if you walked through one of these doors and you ended up somewhere else? So that was the initial thread of inspiration. And that was kind of what like slammed into my idea of like sisters and forest. And then these doors popped up and then everything was kind of built around that particular.
I love that was your initial inspiration, because that for me was one of the most compelling images in the books when we start, sort of going back to the scene of when it all started. That really stuck with me. So that's really cool that you saw that in real life and built a whole story around it.
Well, it's so weird. I don't know about you, but but with other books as well, I can't really like track back to the exact moment that the spark of inspiration came. It's usually like it builds over time and you take little pieces and eventually it comes and it's an idea that you start working on. But this was a real like moment in time. And I have pictures of that I took of these doors on that day. And I started writing notes in the car on that day after I'd seen these doors. And they like were the very first notes that I took for this story. So
have you put them up on Instagram?
Oh, I should. I mean,
yes, please do. I was going to go stalk your feed if you've already done it, but if you haven't, that would be really cool to see.
I'll have to go back and find them.
Awesome. So your first book is contemporary, your second book also, although it, sort of like hints maybe of a bit of magic. And with this book, you have a lot of different elements that you're blending. It's still a contemporary story. They live in our world, but obviously there's also a paranormal element. There's some horror. So what was that like pulling all that together? And was your process any different with this book than with others?
Yeah, I think people have been really intrigued about the shift from contemporary to what people are calling like horror or fantasy or folklore. But what most people don't know is that before I wrote Chemical Hearts, I wrote 3 other manuscripts as I was kind of learning how to be an author and how to write a book. So I started my first one when I was 18, and then kind of throughout university, I was working on different projects as well. And they were all like fantasy, sci-fi, thriller-y things. Like this was what I loved to read when I was a teenager. This is what I loved to write when I first started writing novels. And then I somehow accidentally became a contemporary author.
I did the exact same thing. I started out trying to write fantasy, a dystopian, and then fantasy.
Right. I didn't know that. There you go. Yeah. And so, Chemical Hearts was a book I just felt very compelled to write at the time. Like I was going through my first real heartbreak in my, university days. And it was almost like a form of therapy, I suppose. Like I would fit it in around my classes. I would work on it in the mornings before I went to class. I would work on it in the evenings when I got home. And I mean, it was the one that got picked up in the end.
Sold, right? Yeah.
And, it was the one that sold, and it was dreamy. It was my first novel. It was so exciting, and now there's a movie that's been made. But it also came with this kind of brand, I suppose. Like you are a contemporary author now, and that is
publishing does like that. They like to be able to recognize you. Especially if you have a debut that's been successful, like yours was.
Yeah, and so I went to kind of start my second book, and I wanted to write like a Six of Crows style, big epic fantasy set in another world. Just like all these ideas. I'd already written 20,000 words, and I sent it to my agent. I was like, "You're gonna love this. It's gonna blow your mind." Like, no, this is not right. You need to write another contemporary novel. And so I knew I did want to make my way back to the things that I had really enjoyed reading when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I feel like A Semi-Definitive List was sort of my bridging novel where it's very magic realism. You're never really sure kind of what's real, what's imagined. Death is a character. People kind of disappear occasionally, just like when the sun hits them strange. And then I kind of felt like I had permission to go fully into folklore with this one.
That's so great. So you think, is this where you might stay for a bit then? Are you going to go back to that Six of Crows? Because I'm very intrigued.
Ooh, I feel very at home now. I'm very happy in this space. I love when the supernatural kind of just gently brushes up against our world. I think that those kinds of stories are what I really enjoy. But, I wouldn't say no to an epic fantasy one day.
Why not? Well, it's funny because like I said, I did also dabble in fantasy initially, but part of the reason I'm not there is I'm not great at settings. That is not a strength of mine. But you are. So I want to talk about your setting. And this book is so atmospheric, it's so lush. It's just beautifully imagined. So how did you go about creating this world? And of course, some of it is our world, but even our world, it's a very like decadent, glamorous world. And then you cross over to this other side, which is where your supernatural elements are. So how did you kind of create all that and blend it?
Yeah, I'll start with, so it's set in London primarily, and then there's this like shadow world thing that they end up falling into. But even the London, it's like my version of London. It's the London that I dreamed of when I was growing up in a small town in Australia where, you know, the oldest building is like 50 years old. And then I had just moved to London when I was writing this story. You come here and it is this ancient city. And I was just like swept up in the Gothic beauty of it. Like London on a rainy autumn day is just so, the way the light hits things. So I really wanted to capture that kind of ancient feeling of the city where, you know, there does feel like there is still magic around every corner here. Like, I really believe that magic could exist in London for sure. Not where I grew up though, but here, definitely. And then part of the kind of challenge, I think, with creating the kind of world on the other side of the door is making it feel not too disjointed from the world that you've come from. So you do want to feel like these two halves kind of work in parallel, because if they just fell through somewhere and it was just completely foreign or it didn't make sense with the setting that you'd originally established, I think that would really just draw people out of the story. So that was something I thought about a lot. Like, what is that world? Why does it exist?
Yeah.
Why does it call them back there? And I won't spoil anything, but what it actually is, like what it functions as now in this published draft, in this published version, is not what it was in earlier drafts. I was still kind of interesting. Yeah, I was really trying to figure out what it was and why they went there. And so for the first few drafts, it was just a place that they happened to go for some reason, and I knew I would figure it out eventually. But it was something
you did.
Yeah, it was something I had to work with my editor on to like figure out what this place actually was. But we got
I always love to hear stuff like that, because sometimes when we read a finished book, it's so perfectly realized, it's like the end of your vision, and it feels like it always was that. And I'm always so interested to hear what kind of steps an author took to get there, because it is, in the beginning, it's like lots of little bits of ideas and you're not quite sure how they fit together. And it does take time, and it takes drafts, and it takes brainstorming with your editor. So it sounds like you had a good partnership there.
For sure. I mean, this novel has probably changed more than any of my other things that I've worked on. I just wasn't married to any particular plot point in the story. And I felt I was very willing to kind of see it as a malleable product that could change drastically. Yeah. So, in the beginning, actually, so Vivi is the rebellious character in this version, and Iris is very studious and very kind of straighty 180. But in the original draft, it was flipped, and Iris was very rebellious, and Vivi was off at university. Yeah, it's like so much has changed since the first draft with this one, but I got it to where I wanted it to be in the end.
Well, I was going to ask you next about the sisters. So that's a great lead in. So they are the heart of the story, the relationship between these three, and they're very different. So how did you go about, what was your thought process in creating these three very different types of young women? And is there any one that you especially identified with?
Yeah, so the way I approached their personalities was it was kind of outside in. So they're all very beautiful, ethereal, intoxicating, like unnaturally beautiful. And the way I began to build their personalities was the way that they thought of their own beauty. So Gray, we have is a supermodel, like a fashion designer, a celebrity. She accentuates her beauty. She uses it as a tool to move through the world. And she really sees it as advantageous. She does everything she can to accentuate it. You know, she wears high heels, she wears makeup, she's very glamorous, she's an Instagram dream girl, if you will. And then we have Vivi, who is equally as naturally beautiful, but rebels against our kind of standard ideals of beauty. So she has shaved her head, she's covered in tattoos, she's covered in piercings, and she prefers to kind of downplay her beauty as much as possible. And then we have Iris, who is kind of in between both of her sisters. Like, she doesn't do anything to accentuate it, but she doesn't do anything to like degrade it either. She exists in this kind of like neutral space where she really just doesn't want to be noticed. She wants to kind of blend into the shadows a little bit.
Very difficult for a hollow.
Yes, very difficult for a hollow. And so that was kind of the basis upon which I built these three very different women. They all kind of react to the way that they look and the way the world perceives them because they look this way. And then, I mean, I'm an Iris hollow. I'm a studious little, you know, follower.
She's very relatable. I think a lot of book people will relate to Iris. She's just trying to get by, go to her classes, you know.
Trying to get by. She's like, supernatural. Just stop like coming at me.
Stop staring at my supernatural beauty, okay? I'm just trying to like go to school.
But I think they were all really fun to write, but I really enjoyed writing Gray because she is a really interesting character. I personally have never written a female character before who was so just like aware of her own beauty and so willing to use it, to wield it almost like a weapon. And then, of course, she's very morally gray as well. So it was fun to write someone who's just so powerful and so unapologetic about her power.
Yeah. And the way that beauty is used as, you know, a tool sometimes, the way that it's a commodity at other times, that it can be dangerous for, you know, both the girls and sometimes the people around them. I thought was really interesting and has some like real world parallels as well. So was that something you were thinking of as you wrote?
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to kind of look at the idea of, you know, you're asking for it in certain situations. Like if you wear something in particular, or if you walk home alone at night, or if you wear high heels, or if you've been drinking, you know, you're asking for it. And then Gray is kind of the like, she's the antithesis of that. She is the girl who walks home alone at night in high heels and a miniskirt, but she knows nothing is going to happen to her. And if anyone like screws with her, there will be consequences. Yeah. And I think there's something really satisfying about that.
It's very refreshing to read.
Yeah. So I did want to look at beauty as currency, and also did really want it to be a book about, you know, being a young woman in the world today, and the way that they move through the world because they are women, like public spaces and streets alone at nighttime. There are a lot of scenes that are just, they maybe feel horrifying because it's a horror novel, but it's actually just because they're girls.
Well, that's it. A lot of it is scary just because they are young women alone sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Like they don't know what's going on early in the book. All they know is that there's kind of a creepy guy watching them, and they, you know, they feel unsafe on the street by themselves at nighttime.
Right.
Yeah.
And we won't spoil anything, but it's very interesting to see all that develop as they learn really what's going on. So did you have, as you were writing, a favorite scene that was just like the most fun to write, or the most challenging and therefore like the most satisfying?
I think you can really tell that I enjoyed describing like the apartments and the houses that all of the characters live in, or that they move through as we go through the book. So that was another thing I had to cut. Gray, the supermodel, she has all these like hidden apartments all over London where she keeps all of her like creepy stuff that she collects. And I I think she had like 4 apartments in the beginning.
She had more than one secret apartment.
Tour of all these places. So that was a lot of fun. And she, there's this big old Victorian house that the family lives in. And we end up in Edinburgh at another house. And I just really loved the feeling of describing a new space as we moved into it. The smells especially, but the geography of it. Often I would look up apartments on websites where they're selling flats in London and be like, oh yes, this could be the flat from my book. Take little snippets of inspiration from there. But I think that's what kind of gives it its Gothic quality, is we spend so much time exploring these kind of labyrinthine bolt hole apartments. That
I would have gladly read about 3 to 4 more of Gray's secret apartments. So your editor and I are going to have words.
I'll send you some deleted scenes so you can have.
Please do, because I really love those. And yeah, they've absolutely, reflected the character very well too, as you find all these like little hidden pieces of her. And it's very much reflected in, what she chooses to keep and display in her homes. Yeah,
because she's actually not on screen or on page at all for the first half of the novel, for a lot of it, actually. You only get to know her through like flashbacks or what you find like lying around. So you have to do a lot of character building without actually having this person be there. So that was a good way to do it.
Yeah. So there's a mystery, obviously, to this story, which is near and dear to my heart, which is, several mysteries, really. There's what happened to the girls. There's what happened to Gray. There's, what's going to happen next. So you'd mentioned you didn't know all of those pieces, when you started, which is part of the fun sometimes of writing mysteries, right? Is like surprising yourself. But are you kind of a plotter with that kind of stuff? Did you have certain beats you knew you wanted to hit as you were drafting it? Or how did you manage, that sort of logistical side of knowing you've got to unravel a mystery?
Yeah. Someone was asking me about this recently. I should keep my iPad here so I could like show you my plotting, but I do emotional plotting rather than like plot plotting. So I plot the emotions that I want readers to feel as they move through the book. So there's like high highs and low lows, and you kind of go on a bit of a roller coaster through it. And so then I do that first, and then kind of think about the way the story needs to unfold over that structure to hit those points. So they're almost like,
so it's the emotional beats versus the plot beats that you're kind of focusing on initially. Yeah.
And then what ends up kind of lining up with those beats is, I think, the moments you would see in a trailer for a movie. So these are kind of the things that I know going in, like the character setup, the inciting incident, and the kind of like big points that you hit along the way, which is kind of what you would see in a trailer. And that really is what entices me into the story and sells the story to me, because I get this little loop in my head of these moments. And then writing the book is about filling in the gaps between those moments that interest you. So yeah, that's the hard part.
I love that. Well, it is a very emotional book too, so I can see that the work you put in there. And one of the things that your books often touch upon is the theme of grief and loss, and this book is similar. There's been loss in these girls' lives, including the time they disappeared and don't have a real memory of what happened back then. So can you talk a little bit about what you kind of wanted your readers to take away from their experience and what they go through in this book?
Yeah, I think this is a really just like valuable thing that most fiction teaches us is, even if we haven't experienced loss personally, we see it as kind of a template for how to move through loss or grief. And if you have experienced grief or loss personally, it's kind of like you feel like this book was written for you if you've experienced something similar. An experience that I had recently. My partner was quite sick with COVID over Christmas and New Year's. And then I read Hamnet immediately afterwards, which is about Shakespeare's son dying of the plague. And it was like I had been handed the exact book that I was supposed to read at the exact time, because I was processing a lot of like feelings about him being ill. Yeah. And so it's not going to hit everyone at exactly the right time, but maybe people will remember it, or for some people it will land in their hands at exactly the moment they need to read it. And also I think fiction, and especially fantasy, is just such a wonderful escape from our reality. Like books for me when I was growing up were definitely like my safe bubble that I went to, my escape. And so I think that is this for a lot of people too. And I hope people find that in House of Hollow.
Yeah, it's an amazing escape. So if you haven't read it yet, all of our friends online here, definitely check it out. I devoured it in probably a day, I think. So one of the things I love about this book is like how cinematic it is. And we've talked about, your first book was a movie and it was great. Your second is in development. And I don't know if there's anything you can talk about related to the third, but are you interested in continuing to, kind of be part of your books coming to life on screen?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the most surreal experience I think I've had in my entire life when Chemical Hearts was being made. I got to go to set and kind of see all the magic happening behind the scenes. And I really just almost had like an out of body experience. Like I felt like I was in the Matrix and someone was going to pull the plug at any second. And I would come crashing.
Such an amazing cast too, like really wonderful cast for your main characters.
Yeah, we got so lucky. But it was really, honestly, dreamlike. Like really I think I was just high on endorphins or something, but it felt, utterly surreal. And so I would love to see House of Hollow on screen. I think it would be so kind of just lush and glamorous, and just think of the costumes we could have.
That's what I'm thinking. The fashion alone would be amazing.
Yeah, so I can't confirm anything yet, but exciting things are happening in the background, and hopefully we'll have some news confirmed soon. We'll watch this space.
Everybody keep their eye on your socials.
Yes.
And yes, fingers crossed. Yeah. So the last thing I'll ask, because I know we have some questions and I want to make sure we get to them, but I feel like at the end we left things like a little bit open, and maybe there could be more in this universe. Is that something you could confirm or deny, or is something you'd be interested in?
Look, with my first two books, I felt very, very clearly that they were standalones, and I kind of left the characters at the end, and I have no concept of what they're doing now, where they are. They're just kind of living their lives without me. With this one, I would consider going back to this world because I had so much fun playing in it. No real plans at the moment for a sequel, but lots of people already are banging on my door and asking me to write one. So we'll see is my answer. Maybe it's not a no. It's
okay. You already know which character I need an update on. So regardless, you're going to have to share details about whatever you're imagining there.
You will get an update, I promise.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let me see what kind of questions folks are asking here. What has been your proudest moment since becoming a published author? That's a great question. I like that.
I mean, I have these really wonderful moments, these small moments, I think, every week when readers get in touch through my email and they share their personal stories with me. And because, you send a book out into the world and you don't really know how it impacts people. Right. Or where it finds them at which point in their lives. And it's so lovely just to get these little notes from people being like, I read this book at this particular moment in my life and it was exactly what I needed to read.
Yeah.
those are so sweet and they make me so happy. And then there are the big things, right? Like the movie coming out last year was a huge, huge deal. And I was so like blown away by that whole thing. Unfortunately, it was, lockdown and
pandemic, but in some ways, we're all home ready to watch and stream.
Exactly.
So
I really wanted my red carpet moment, but we kind of recreated it here in London. We bought a carpet that we laid out on a rooftop, and then we were allowed to gather with, I think there were like 10 people we were allowed to gather with at the time.
Oh, that's good.
And so we had some really close friends come over and walk on the red carpet. And we did a film screening on a friend's rooftop with just like a projector we'd bought off of Amazon. Thank you, Amazon.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because that is a shame that you did not get to have that like full experience. But it sounds like you did the next best possible thing you could have.
Yeah, and then I'm really proud of this book. Actually, this is probably my proudest book, the book that I feel most proud of. It took me the longest time to write. I wasn't sure if like shifting genres was the right thing for me. I wasn't sure if people would like this book because it's a bit weird and like some weird stuff happens. And honestly, can't believe they let me get away with it. But the reaction to it has just been so overwhelmingly positive, and I'm really proud of this one and can't wait to kind of get back into writing more like it.
And I think it's so inspiring that you did. I was just chatting with an author friend who's thinking of moving on to a different genre than what she's known for, and she was worried, like will readers follow me? And I said, well, I have a friend come to our event tomorrow night because she did exactly that, and readers love it. And I really feel like if this is the book that you are passionate about, that's going to come across, and that really came across with this one. For you.
Definitely.
Let's see. Oh, yes. What did you think when you first saw this amazing cover? Did you imagine it could be that great?
I did not imagine it could be that great. Let me tell you the story of this cover. So usually you don't get a say. You don't get a say in your covers, right? You would know this, Karen. They send it to you. It pops up in your inbox. Here's your cover. And that was the case for my first two covers, which I love. I think they're beautiful and striking, the fish on the white background. And then this time, my publisher was more open to collaboration. And so they reached out quite early on and asked me to send through a mood board of kind of what I envisioned the aesthetic of House Apollo to be. And so I sent through a bunch of pictures that I had been saving. And I said, I really love the cover of Wilder Girls as well, the Rory Power book.
Yes, that's a beautiful cover.
Stunning. And then my publisher came back and they were like, well, what if we got the same artist, just this Turkish artist, does these amazing kind of like portraits really of women with like flowers growing out of them or growing through their bodies. And there's lots of really interesting, surreal stuff like that. And he had something that was similar to this, but we couldn't use that one. And so he agreed to create a new one for us. And he came back with this like incredible actual piece of art.
So that's original art for your book. That is so cool.
Yeah. And I can't wait to have it, blown up and put on my wall because it's really just so striking and so stunning. So I feel really blessed and grateful for this cover. This is the dream.
It is a stunner. That is cool.
Thanks.
Can you tell us about the audiobook process for this book? How much input did you have, and have you listened to the audio version?
I haven't listened the whole way through to the audio version because I'm always terrified of like hearing things I could have improved or made better when someone reads it back to me. So we'll get around to it one day. But, so usually the US takes the lead on my audiobooks, but this time, since it's set in the UK, we wanted to use a British actress. And so my publisher in the UK sent through some like voice samples auditioning essentially. And one of the samples was just so spot on for Iris. She has this like haunting voice, with an almost like dull-like quality to it, and it just like sent chills down my spine listening to it. So I was so excited to book her, and she is the narrator for the audiobook. And it's actually wonderful, the audiobook. I haven't listened to the whole way through, but other people should, because she does such a good job.
It's wonderful, isn't it, when the voice actor really just does kind of nail your character and is just exactly conveys what you were trying to get across. They are so talented.
Yeah, it almost solidifies it for you. Like I can kind of conceptualize my characters and kind of conceptualize what they sound like, but then you hear it for the first time, like in the reel, and it brings a whole new level to it. So
yeah.
And
one thing I think is really cool about audiobooks is the way that the actors will, they'll interpret a line and put emotion into it. And, you would almost think that they had asked you, is this what you meant? Because they so often get it exactly right. And that doesn't happen often. But when I listen to it, I think, that's exactly what I wanted that character to get across. And you nailed that. And that's a cool part of the process.
Yeah, because you're often not doing that when you're writing. You're not, sitting there and like acting out your lines. You're just kind of like reading over it while you're drafting, and often just like skimming through things that you've put down before. So yeah, they're geniuses. How they do it, I don't know.
Someone is asking which hollow sister you're the most like, and I know we already talked about that, and it's Iris. Anything else you want to add there to that?
So yeah,
are there pieces of you in Gray and Vivi?
Oh, for sure. There are pieces of my relationship with my sisters, I think, built in and around this intense relationship that these hollow sisters have. So Iris is the youngest, and she's our protagonist, but I'm actually the eldest of three girls. And I don't think I'm a very Gray-like character mostly, but I feel super protective of my younger sisters. But there's a scene in the book where Iris talks about how she can't sleep, or she couldn't sleep when she was a kid unless she could feel the pulse points of both of her sisters on either side of her. And that was me when I was like 12 years old. I was really scared of the dark. And my younger sisters had to protect me from the dark by coming and sleeping in my bed. And I needed to be able to feel them on either side of me in order to like feel safe and fall asleep. So things like that kind of, kind of built in into their relationship, which was really nice.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. What inspired Gray's character, most specifically her fashion house and perfume? I love everything about her, even the sinister bits. Agreed.
She's fun. She's fun. Yeah, so this is one of the things that I can't track back to its exact genesis. Like the doors I can, and the overall concept I can. Gray being a fashion designer just kind of fell in organically, which I know is a really dissatisfying answer, but it was in the first draft, and it was always just such a big part of her character. I knew I wanted her to be kind of extravagant and famous and to wield her beauty. So it felt like a natural choice to make her, a really well-known model, and then a fashion designer. And I think there's a Vogue article that you read really early on. Like Iris opens up a Vogue article and starts reading. And I just love, as you do too, I love a fake news story in a book.
I enjoyed those very much.
I love like creating these kind of extra pieces that are inserted into the story. And so that original Vogue article became part of the basis around which I built Gray's character. And I just loved the idea of her hiding all of these secret messages in her designs. She's so enigmatic. She embroiders things. There are little engravings. There's invisible ink. There's messages rolled up and sewn into bodices. And so, that was I knew once I found that was what Gray did and who she was in the world.
It all fit together so well for her.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific routine or place that you go to write? I used to write at coffee houses and out of the house, but have been struggling since the pandemic to just write at my house.
Yeah, I struggle as well. I don't have a specific routine or even a specific place that I go to write. In the before times, I would go out and work in coffee shops or co-working spaces. I know for me that morning writing is my most productive time. So if I can get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, honestly, I can do more work between 6 and 8 than I will do for the rest of the day. So I think when I'm fresh and when I haven't checked my emails or my social media, before the sun has risen, before I've eaten anything, I just get a cup of tea and I go and try and write 1,000 words in that kind of 2 to 3 hours before the day begins. That's when I'm in serious drafting mode and I need to kind of get words out every day. When I'm not in serious drafting mode, I am a mess, and it comes out very slowly. 300
deadlines really help, don't they?
Time, it just kind of drips out, and I'm not very disciplined, and somehow novels get written, albeit very slowly. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But I do recommend the morning routine and the 1,000 words a day when you are trying to just get a chunk out.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Someone said they would love to see House of Hollow as a movie, which of course I would too. Any chance? We did talk about that, but that's we're all quite hopeful, but nothing we can share right now.
I'd love to have Anya Taylor-Joy play someone. If anyone is connected to her, let me know. We'll have my people talk to her people. We'll get it.
She would be great. She has that like ethereal kind of look, doesn't she?
She's so otherworldly. She's like a fairy queen, and she has the dark eyes and the blonde hair. So I think she'd be great as Gray. I think she'd be fantastic.
She would be. And I just feel like that's a role she would enjoy. She seems like the type of actress who would have a lot of fun with that. So yes, let's make that happen.
Love it. Done.
If you could have a dinner party and invite fictional characters, including your own, who would you invite?
Oh my goodness.
And this is a question for both of us too. So I'll answer after you do, or I'll try to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine all of my main characters at a dinner party together and how long. That is fun. Yes. So yeah, I guess we'd have Grace and Henry, who would probably be like down one end together. Henry would just be like only paying attention to Grace. Grace would probably be crying. It would not be
not a fun party.
And then you'd have Esther and Jonah, and they'd be more fun. I think Jonah is quite fun. He's very he's the life of the party, likes to entertain. Esther, there would definitely be something she's afraid of in the room. So quite closed down, and she has a bit of social anxiety as well. So it'd be a bit difficult for her. And then you would just have these 3 gigantic ethereal women just kind of floating about, eating all your food, actually, because
that's true.
They eat constantly.
Very healthy appetites.
They're always hungry. So yeah, it would be great, but it would be a disaster.
It'd be a really interesting mix of characters.
Yes. What about you? I think there'd be a murder at yours, right?
Yeah. The problem with me is I write multi-POV, so at this point I've just turned in my 6th book. that's probably like 20 point of view characters alone. And we're not even getting into the side characters. So we'd need to have a banquet hall if they were all going to show up. And there would probably be a crime because that is what happens.
There would have to be, sure.
Yeah. And there are definitely characters who are, on the more proactive side and who would sort of like take charge of the situation, like a Bronwyn from One of Us is Lying, or a Millie from The Cousins. And then you would have others like Cooper, who just wants to eat his dinner and, for once in his life, not have to deal with murder while he's trying to eat. So.
Not today, Cooper. I'm sorry.
Not today. Sorry. This is not that day. So the last question I have here is someone asking if you could read an excerpt, which I don't know if you want to pull one out of your book or if we have time for that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll read a little bit of the prologue. I read the prologue on my Instagram yesterday, but it takes about 8 minutes. So I might just do a few minutes of the prologue. I was 10 years old the first time I realized I was strange. Around midnight, a woman dressed in white slipped through my bedroom window and cut off a lock of my hair with sewing scissors. I was awake the whole time, tracking her in the dark, so frozen by fear that I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I watched as she held the curl of my hair to her nose and inhaled. I watched as she put it on her tongue and closed her mouth and savored the taste for a few moments before swallowing. I watched as she bent over me and ran a fingertip along the hook-shaped scar at the base of my throat. It was only when she opened my door, bound for the bedrooms of my older sisters, with the scissors still held at her side, that I finally screamed. My mother tackled her in the hall. My sisters helped hold her down. The woman was rough and rabid, thrashing against the three of them with a strength we'd later learn was fueled by amphetamines. She bit my mother. She headbutted my middle sister, Vivi, so hard in the face that her nose was crushed and both of her eye sockets were bruised for weeks. It was Gray, my eldest sister, who finally subdued her. When she thought my mother wasn't looking, she bent low over the wild woman's face and pressed her lips against her mouth. It was a soft kiss right out of a fairy tale, made gruesome by the fact that the woman's chin was slick with our mother's blood. For a moment, the air smelled sweet and wrong, a mixture of honey and something else, something rotten. Gray pulled back and held the woman's head in her hands, and then watched her, intently, waiting. My sister's eyes were so black they looked like polished river stones. She was 14 then, and already the most beautiful creature I could imagine. I wanted to peel the skin from her body and wear it draped over mine. The woman shuddered beneath Gray's touch, and then just stopped. By the time the police arrived, the woman's eyes were wide and far away, her limbs so liquid she could no longer stand and had to be carried out, limp as a drunk, by 3 officers. I wonder if Gray already knew then what we were. And I will leave it at that.
That is so deliciously creepy.
A little taster for you of what life is like as a hollow sister. People crawling through your bedroom window at night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm back because we're out of time. But I want to say thank you so much to both of you. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
I'm a huge fan of the books, and
great.
Thank you to Miami Book Fair for teaming up with us on this event. Thank you to Penguin Teen for sending Krystal our way, and thank you to Karen for being a brilliant conversant. We love both of you and your books, so we're really excited to have spent tonight with you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for hosting.
Thank you for hosting, and thank you so much, Karen, for being here tonight to chat with. I had a great time.
It was my pleasure. Now enjoy the rest of your night.
Yay! Time for bed, I think.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.